I hope you guys had a really good weekend. Hope nobody injured themselves or anything like that while they were out having fun. I mean, out there working really, really hard because I know all of you are incredibly studious students. And you wouldn't even consider having fun because you use up all your energy growing smarter. Is that right? Today, I wanted to talk about three different things. I wanted to talk a little bit about what is art. I wanted to talk about the four kinds of art making. And I wanted to talk about the four steps for the tools of artistic critique. I think all of you did a pretty good job. I've been in classes before where somebody hears critique and they just start listing all the things that are wrong with somebody's work. And that's not what we're about, is it? I think it's a waste of everybody's energy if that's all that you can see. There used to be a student, not at this university, of course, because everybody here is brilliant, smart, and very kind, but at another university, there was somebody who was doing, it was supposed to be the movie critic, and it didn't matter what the movie was, they always found ways to pick it apart and destroy it. And that's not what criticism is, or that's what criticism has become, but that's not what criticism is. So we'll talk about that towards the end. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about art and what art is. I think you guys have a pretty good idea of what I think art could be. I'd like to hear from each of you as to what you think art is after you went over and read some of that. Who would like to go first?
Art is an expression.
That's good. Art is an expression. There's a lot of things that are expressions. What separates art as an expression from other ways that you could be expressive?
It's a visual expression.
Well, I'd like to say maybe it's a creative expression. It doesn't have to be visual. There's lots of art that is not necessarily visual, but it is specifically different than like yelling or throwing a tantrum or expressing yourself in other ways. It seems to be a little bit of a creative product somehow that's expressive. That's good. Who else would like to go? Well, everybody's going to have to go. Who would like to?
Um, well, I was gonna say it's something like you created and um, using like your imagination a lot.
All right, that's good. It's something that you build or create that you've used your imagination to do. That's very good. It's a window into how you're thinking, basically. All right, who's next?
I was gonna say the same things, but I was gonna say it's like a way of sharing your feelings without having to talk about it.
I think that's really good. It's one of the things I think that art is very successful when it's communication, and I think it's really excellent because it's not limited to vocabulary. I think that's really good. And when you're communicating through art, people can see or not see whatever they're in the mood to. You know, they bring a lot of themselves to the conversation. That's really good. I like that. How about you, Casey?
I was pretty much just going to say the same thing, that like you don't need to use words to express it.
I think that's really good. I think at its root somehow art communicates, and even though we may do something that 1,000 years from now somebody will come across and look at, it's still going to be a two-way communication. It's not like what we're used to, but when we see something that somebody else has made, we start putting ourselves in their shoes or start guessing what they're meaning. And we have this ongoing conversation, not just with the artist, but with who we imagine the artist might be or might have been. Who was that maker? You look at something like Stonehenge and you start having this conversation with yourself, were these giants? Who were the people that made these? Were they just really industrious? How did they move these things around? How did they chisel them? What does it mean? And you start developing this idea of whoever it was who put these things together, and start kind of talking to them in a sense. But it's like all of you have said, it deals a lot with your imagination. And from the artist's perspective, you've created something that you have an intent to, or your rationale for building it in the first place. And everything you're doing for a specific reason. Whether or not you are able to articulate that, I guess you're articulating that reason through the art that you're building. So yeah, it's very much communication. Those are good. Those are all good things. Can you folks remember the 4 different ways of making art? What's the first one?
Additive.
Right. And what does that mean?
You have something and you have like a piece of paper and you make it into like something more than just a piece of paper.
Yeah, you're adding more of the same material to it. So yeah, that's right. So for example, if you're working with paper, additive would be origami is a good example. You're adding folds to the paper. It's still paper. Uh, Maybe collage. If you're collaging with paper, that's another good example because you're adding more paper to it. There is a Finnish artist that makes these huge pillars out of just stacks of paper. And you think, well, that sounds kind of boring. But if you're stacking a 20-foot tall pillar just of office paper, it starts becoming a lot more than just regular paper. It starts becoming almost a monument. So yeah, very good. Another good example is clay. As you pinch clay out of the container that you have your clay in, and you start squishing it together, you're building an additive object. Can anybody think of another example of additive art? I'm sure all of you, when you took this class, were really hoping that we wouldn't be doing sketches every day, but sketches and drawings are very additive. You're using paper as the backing, and you're adding the charcoal or the pencil or the pen to it. So it's a very additive kind of process. What's another process?
Subtractive, so like taking away or carving.
All right, very good. Have any of you, I sure hope you have any of you made those paper snowflakes where you just fold up paper? Yeah, that's a very subtractive. Uh, I think in Japanese it's called kirigami. But I have a friend who does, if you can imagine this, he does calligraphy. He has these huge sheets of paper and he cuts everything outside of the calligraphy out so that the paper is the thing that makes the calligraphy after he's removed everything. I thought I had OCD. I look like a slob next to this person. Can anybody think of another? You mentioned carving. What kind of carving? I guess any kind of carving, huh? You're carving a pumpkin, carving soap, carving stone, carving wood. All of that is subtractive. Excellent. What's the third kind?
Conceptual.
Conceptual is very good. Excellent. Let's see. What is the difference between conceptual art and the other physical arts? what are you sculpting with when you're doing conceptual work? And the other kinds of art, you're using a physical material to sculpt with or to create. In conceptual art, you're using the physical material to sculpt or create where? In the viewer's
Mind.
mind. Excellent. That's quite a bit more different because you're working specifically with how people are responding to your art rather than just letting the art out there and allowing people to respond however they want. And conceptual art, there's some really interesting examples, and I think there's some really atrociously awful examples that people try to pass off as conceptual art too. And I think we have to be careful when we look at it. Sometimes it's valid, sometimes it's not, and we'll use the tools of artistic critique to help us to see whether or not, evaluate whether or not something is valid. And then there's a fourth kind. Can anybody remember what the fourth kind is?
Assemblage.
Excellent, very good. What separates assemblage? Or what defines assemblage? How is that different than additive?
With additive, for the most part, you're using the same material for the entire piece. With assemblage, you might use various different types of material, whether they're related or cohesive or not.
Very good, excellent. And did any of you see the video with Betty Saar? Anybody? She is an assemblage artist that also does collage, and a lot of the time she'll do a collage inside of an assemblage. And there are some of these artists that do this kind of thing are really pretty amazing. I think Ai Weiwei, he's a sculptor from China, and in some areas of China, schools have been made historically that are just not very sound. And there was a school that was destroyed during an earthquake, and over 120 children died in the school collapse. And the Chinese government ignored the fact that it happened. And so Ai Weiwei collected a children's school backpack, one for each of the children who perished, and he mounted them on the wall of an internationally recognized museum. So that was very much an assemblage, and it made a pretty powerful statement. Can you imagine seeing a wall completely covered with that many backpacks? So yeah, I think you guys understand what and there's other different kinds of art as well. There's a lot of different kinds, but I think that those are the four primary ones. And then the four that are the ones that we'll be talking about for the rest of the term. And most everything I think that we think of as art outside of music and poetry are things that will fit into those four categories for the most part. And by the time we get done, everybody will have had an experience making something from each of those categories, or actually several things. Now, is Olivia, are you able to get in on this at all? Because it shows that you are waiting in the...
I am here.
Okay, you are. All right. Okay, excellent. Because from my screen just shows that you are caught eternally in the lobby, and I have no idea what that means.
Can you see my face?
No, there's no screen.
Kendall, can you see my face? I can't.
Oh, now I can see you. Yes.
I can see your face.
Excellent. That is weird. I wonder why. I This is odd. I don't know. I don't understand why the computer is not allowing me to see everybody. Sigh.
Can you see Kendall's?
Well, I did see her earlier.
I'm in
Now I can
Kendall's
see her again.
background.
Okay. Oh, there you are. All right. Yes. That is really, that gives me motion sickness. All right. Let's see. And we have, okay. So I am seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. Is that right? Okay. Megan, I see you. Oh, yeah. Yes. Thank you very much, Olivia. That really helps. All right. I think I've got everybody. Um, the next thing I wanted to talk about is, okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the idea of the tools of artistic critique. And then I wanted to ask to see if anybody has any questions or whatever about the things that we're doing this week. I am noticing that my lips are not in sync with the sound. Is that giving anybody else like motion sickness as well? Okay, good. As soon as Iron Man releases all of his latest technology, then I think we'll be fine. But until then, we just got to deal with what we've got. All right. The tools of artistic critique are what we use to process our understanding of art and what we're seeing when we interact with art. Um, does anybody is anybody able to articulate what critical thinking is? The process of critical thinking. If you don't, that's perfectly fine. I'll talk about it a little bit. The Dalai Lama was asked several years ago, what is the most necessary thing for people to learn so that we can survive the modern age? And he said, true critical thinking. Critical thinking is when we think with intent, where we pretty much objectively categorize what we're seeing, where we think about it, where we recognize the emotions that we have with it and our reactions to it, but we don't allow those emotions and reactions to really dictate what we think about it. So, for example, as children, if something falls on us, we react with hurt immediately. Um, when you get a little bit older, if you have siblings or a friend who accidentally hurts you, we're able to process that and realize, well, this is an accident, so I'm not going to get upset or angry at them right away. Or if you do get upset, you're able to forgive them quickly and move on. Everybody's had that experience. But that little bit of a pause before from feeling the impact of something to being able to rationalize, well, this is a friend and they don't really mean me harm, that process is an example of critical thinking because we're thinking with intent. Does everybody understand that? Does that make a little bit of sense? When we look at art and try to examine it using the process of critical thinking, we're going to describe the art. We're going to try to figure out how the artist made what they'd made. We're going to try to guess what the artist was meaning when they made what they did. And then we're going to evaluate it. Now, it's impossible for human beings to be completely objective for the most part because we always insert part of ourselves. I think that's one of the defining characteristics of art. It's not just an object, it has intent, it has context, and we're not just relating something that we see or interact with. What we're relating is actually how we feel about it. It goes through our minds somehow. And so when we lay it out on the table or create it, it's not just the thing, it's also how we think about the thing. And we get into that a little bit when we're talking about the tools of artistic critique. The first step is describing. We want to talk about how big the thing is, what the material is, the textures may be involved in the material. Um, Colors would be good. If we can identify it as something that's realistic or abstract, that would be good. Is it flat? Does it have curves? Is it a flat thing that has texture to it? Like there are some painters where the painting is heavily glazed, so it's all very flat, and there are other painters that have put a lot of texture into their painting, so it becomes almost an experience just through the process of viewing. The second step is analyze. That's where we try to figure out, what did the artist do? How did the artist make that thing? What kind of processes did they use? Did they drill holes in it? Did they carve it? Did they squish it around in their fingers as they were forming it with clay? Did they make a painting and then light it on fire? What were they doing as they were making the thing? The third step is interpretation, where we're asking ourselves, what potentially did the artist mean? And this is where we start getting into a conversation with the artist. Of course, this is an imaginary conversation, but we're still kind of guessing. We're starting to form an imaginary figure of who the artist was and what they were thinking when they made the thing. And we're starting to, at least in our imagination, ask them about their process. What were you considering when you did this? Why did you put these lines here? Why did you make those lines jagged and these lines smooth? Then the fourth step is we're asking, is the art successful? Does it have a principal function that it performs? And is it successful in that? Is its primary function just to make us think about something? And is it successful in that? Or is its principal function to be hung on a wall and appreciated? Can we do that? And I would like to give an example of this with just a random object that I have here on my desk. It's something that I picked up at Walmart. Can everybody see that? So what's the first step? Anybody want to hazard a guess? What's the first step of the process of using the tools of artistic critique? The first step is to describe. What do we see in this? I say what we see is something that's about 6 inches long, maybe about 4 inches wide, maybe about 5 inches tall, if we include the tag there. I'm looking at something that looks like 4 organic shapes that have several holes in them that are inside of a red mesh plastic bag. And I see this identification card stapled to the top of it. To me, it doesn't look like something that was intentionally made for enjoyment. It looks like a very functional thing, the bag and the card, that's designed to be a container for what we see inside. So that's the process of description. All I did was describe how the object or the thing impacts the physical world, and that's it. Second step is to analyze. Being, well, I dropped it. I don't know. It doesn't look to me like the artist made the things that are inside the bag. It looks like those are organically formed. They look to me like they're probably natural sponges that have just been cut up and shoved in this bag. But I do believe that somebody's hand designed the red mesh plastic. And I do believe that there was a designer that came up with the logo on the identification card. So I think that that's something that was manufactured. It looks to me like it was probably something that a person photoshopped together because it looks very clean. It looks like it was digitally mastered and then printed out. And it looks to me like this red mesh plastic was probably extruded somehow in a manufacturing plant. So somebody had to design the CAD system to generate that. Now, what's the third step? Does anybody remember?
Interpreting.
We just, yes, excellent, very good. So, how can we interpret this? I'm thinking that the best way to interpret this, because these images are so clear and the writing is very legible, I think we can interpret this as a functional card to identify what's inside. And I think we can interpret this as a practical use object where the bag is designed specifically to hold these 4 sponges. And I'm thinking that we can further interpret that these sponges were selected because this looks like it is designed to be consumed by people who want to do artsy fartsy type stuff. We can interpret that these sponges were selected for their use in texture making for like applying paint. So yes, Olivia, very good. The third step is interpretation. So I think that we can interpret that the artist wants us, or the creator of this object wants us to first uh, pick this because we can use these things for art making, and second, to uh, use this product as a bag holder or as a holder for these sponges. And then third, I think we can interpret that the creator wants us to actually buy this. And so, and I think that's pretty valid. Now, what's the fourth one? The
Is
fourth
it
one,
evaluating?
yes, exactly. Very good. This is where we determine, is this successful? Is this successful for what it is? Why do you think it's successful? Can anybody articulate why they think that this might be successful for what it is?
Because it does its job.
Perfect. Yes, it does its job. Its job is to package the sponges to let us know that the sponges we can use them for art making and that it's for sale. And it does that perfectly. Excellent. Very good. Now, would this be as successful if the plastic bag was completely opaque and we couldn't see what was inside? No, I don't think so. Would it be successful if it didn't have the barcode on the back or tell us what was inside so we could actually buy it? No, I don't think it would be. I think this little hole right here to so that it can stay on to the rack or whatever so we can see it easier. I think that's another aspect of it being successful. So yeah, very good. Those are the 4 steps. When I send this video recording out to everybody later on tonight, I will also include a link to a video that I'd like everybody to watch. We're going to see it several times. 2 people are talking about a specific sculpture that may be kind of uncomfortable to view for the first time you see it. I know, first time I saw it, almost made me want to throw up. But they're able to talk about it using these 4 tools of artistic critique. So by the end of it, at the very least, you're able to appreciate the imagination and the craftsmanship of the person who built it in the first place. And I think that that's what this process, if nothing else, that it helps us to appreciate the effort that goes into making things. So yeah, excellent example. Very good. Now, those are the 3 things that I needed to cover. Does anybody have any questions? about the project or the assignments or any of the things that you interacted with this week in the module. I wanted
Quick
to give you,
question.
yes.
Sorry. Do you take away points if the assignments are late?
I'm going to tell you kind of a secret. A lot of you guys, a lot of students today have jobs. In my one of the semesters of graduate school, I was working a full-time job. I was teaching 3 different classes. I was taking a full credit load, and my day looked like I would get up at 6:30 in the morning, take the girls to school, start off with my first job, go to class, go back to my job, go back to class, teach, and then work on my homework until about 2:30 in the morning, and then at 6:30 I'd start again. And that work lasted until Sunday. And on Sunday, I slept in until 15 minutes before church started. I would get up, get ready to go really fast. The kids' mom would get them ready for church, and then after that, I would eat and go to sleep. That's pretty much what my week looked like. And on Saturday, I would be getting up at 6:30, fill in the rest of my 40-hour work week at my full-time job, and do the rest of my homework and go to sleep at 2:30 again Sunday morning. So everything would start over again. And I know that you guys
I
have,
feel you.
I know that you guys all have similar stories. You either have full-time jobs, part-time jobs, you're working, you're on different teams, you're on different um, things that you have to do, you have responsibilities. And most of the time, a couple days after an assignment is due, if you haven't turned something in, I will put a 0 in there. And then that triggers Canvas to remind you that you need to work on it. If you let me know what's going on, I don't have any problem with assignments being late. As long as you're communicating with me and you're doing the best you can. What frustrates me is, and I will give you a couple actual examples. Somebody called me on my cell phone 15 minutes into the final, telling me that they were calling from a bathroom at an airport in New Jersey and they were not going to be able to attend the final. I, if you can imagine that, that's not something that I really appreciate an awful lot. If something happens, if you can't make it, letting me know what's going on before it's too late is always better. I've also had people email me a month and a half. Actually, the most recent one was 11 months after the end of the class, asking me to change their grade. And this is without any communication or anything, not letting me know what had happened, not letting me know that the assignments were going to be late or anything. So that was almost a year before they waited. I can you imagine that neither of those things are really, really helpful to you as a teacher? If you are struggling, if you are falling behind, there is the accommodations office on campus that can help. But also, please let me know what's going on. If you need to have an extra week or you're going to finish a bunch of assignments over a 3-day weekend, just let me know, and that's perfectly fine. Did that answer your question?
Yep. You're the best.
Okay. Well, just don't tell anybody. I would really appreciate it if you would tell everybody you know that I am the biggest jerk in the world, and I don't have a sense of humor. So please
I
be
got
mindful
you.
of that.
I got you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? I want to give you a couple examples. We're at the half-hour mark. We're a little bit over it. I wanted to just give you a couple examples really quick of assemblage pieces. I have a friend who owns and operates an antiques mall or an antique store. And he has everything from taxidermy Victorian mice that are dressed up in frocks and tailed coats, all the way to uh, carved statues from different continents that were made 300 years ago. So he has a whole wide range of stuff. In his living room, I was sitting chatting to him, and then I realized that the chair I was sitting on was 500 years old. So, but when he does his assemblage pieces, he will start with a cigar box and he will start putting things in it. Usually he will use like doll heads, um, hat pins, um, little hands that he finds from different things that are broken up, um, maybe cigar ends, maybe pencils, and maybe he'll wrap them with linen thread and drip wax on them. But he'll make these things out of odds and ends from his antique store. So I would recommend, if you're struggling with the idea of, what can I do, maybe take $5 or $10, go to Deseret Industries or a thrift store of your choice, and just find a couple really weird things. You can cut them up, you can break them apart, put them together in something else. One of the coolest exhibits that saw when I went to China the first time, there was an exhibit in the Los Angeles airport of a person who had broken pottery, hundreds and hundreds of vessels, all the exact same, and then reassembled them using gold. And there's actually a name for it. It's a Japanese style of pottery restoration. But instead of making these the same again, she built up these huge forms just of broken pottery that she glued together. And that was it doesn't sound like much, but when these things are 10 or 12 feet tall, it becomes rather significant. I want you guys to keep limited to something about like that big. I don't want you to do anything bigger than your head, and keep yourself to 3 hours if you can. After each hour, take a photo of it. So the first hour is a process photo, second hour is a process photo, and then the third hour, your thing should be done, hopefully. So I don't want you to think about it too much, other than having fun assembling the pieces before you begin, and then putting it together. This is None of you guys are to use this necessarily as a portfolio level master's degree project. This is just something to introduce you to the idea of assemblage, right? And your grade is using craftsmanship to hold it together, using just the skill set that you have right now with and following the assignment parameters. All right, you guys understand that? Excellent. And look up the Betty Saar video. She's one of my favorite artists in the whole wide world. I think she's amazing. All right. Any further questions before we break for the rest of your life?
Yes. Can the meetings go in our work log?
I think that they should.
And how many hours are we supposed to get each week?
I would say I think 9 is what we need to do. As close to that as we can. And if you are all done with everything and you're at 7 hours, then you can either review, read some more, or work on your project some more. That's perfectly fine. If you get to a point after 3 hours on this thing and you need to spend another hour on it, go ahead and do that. That'd be perfectly fine. I think that a lot of the times, especially when we're addressing something that's new to us, if we do what we have to do and then we come back to it and spend more time on it, something in our brain snaps, and we don't necessarily go into a flow state, but we go on to the next stage of understanding. And I'm sure that all of you have reached that state in something that you've done, and whatever that is. I know that I used to play soccer ages and ages ago, um, shortly after the Earth's crust began cooling. And our team was really good. In a 14-game season, we won every game but 11 of them. And but there was a stage after practicing so many hours a week, doing just a little bit more, it seemed to allow me to break through and actually gain a little bit of physical coordination, which was startling at the time, because I'm a white boy with no rhythm, and so it's very difficult for me to claim physical coordination over anything. Any other questions? That was a good one, Leah.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I was at the hospital.
Are you all right?
Yeah, my fiance got bit by something. His arm is swelled up, but they told him it was a rash and gave him antibiotics. So, um, on our sketchbooks, can we just put anything in it? It doesn't have to be anything particular, right?
I would like you, ideally, to be using this for primarily your thoughts and reflections about this class.
Okay.
But about 2/3 of them should be visual notes, and you can do written notes for the other third, and that's fine. Honestly, I just want you to get into a habit of recording things that you do 3 times a week. So if you're working on stuff for this class and you're thinking about something else and you want to record it, then that would be fine. Does that help, Brittany?
It does. Bless you.
Well, thank you. All right. Any last questions? All right, folks. If we covered everything, I'm going to try to be putting up modules about 2 a week, but these video conferences that we have will just be about the next module in the sequence. So by the end of 2 months, all the modules should be up online, so you can work ahead if you'd like to, and then we'll use these meetings to ask questions about stuff that you've done, so you can revamp it or whatever you'd like to. All right. And if nobody has any more questions, then we're going to go ahead and end. And I will send this recording, like I said, to everybody. So, Brittany, the time that you missed while you were in the hospital, you'll be able to catch up, no problem. All right. And it's only going to be, 30 or 42 and a half minutes long. All right. So, you guys have a good week, and I will talk to you again. I revamped the schedule on Teams. Our regular meetings should be every Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. And I'm so sorry about yesterday. I don't know why it reverted, but hopefully, if that shows up again at the wrong when you look at your calendar, please email me. A couple people did, and that's how I found out that it had screwed up. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. You be careful, and Brittany, try to help your fiance understand that getting bitten by unknown things is not necessarily a good habit.
Well, he works on the road crew in St. George, so he's probably bitten by a lot of things that he just doesn't talk about.
It's probably safer for everybody's mental health in the family, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
You guys be safe. We'll see you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.